pretty much every year of my life thus far, which I can recount, on Christmas Eve, my family has gathered us around the fireplace in our basement late at night so we could all turn on and enjoy one of my favorite Christmas movies of all time, The Polar Express. Now, I already know some people are probably objecting. The Polar Express is one of those movies which evokes an incredibly mixed reaction from people, generally from my observation, erring on the negative side. It's definitely not perfect in a critical standpoint, but at the same time, there are so many things about it which I think ought to be commended. Sure, while mocap in general is often trashed for looking creepy, I've always personally liked the visuals in Polar Express. It might just be because I've watched it so many times, but to me, they're impressive enough to avoid looking too outdated while still maintaining a whimsical sense of unrealism. The music is absolutely amazing, to the point where I don't even really mind hearing the main theme every 5 minutes of the movie. As an art piece, it's pretty impressive. But, of course, that's not the only merit by which we judge films. The Polar Express is kind of odd. It's wonky, confusing at times, and a bit chaotic, and that can understandably turn some people off. For a Christmas film, it's very unusual, although I'd argue that the likes of many Rankin and Bass classics are equally, if not more bizarre, but I digress, and I completely understand that the Polar Express kind of sticks out and not in all the best ways. As a Christmas movie, it's not for everyone. But notice how I've been saying as a Christmas movie. Because, at least to me, the Polar Express isn't just a Christmas movie. There's something about it which sets it apart from practically anything else available in the lineup of holiday classics. There's something that puts it, in my heart, above the likes of any Rudolph or Little Drummer Boy or Frosty the Snowman or Grinch or Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer or Christmas Mail or even Elf. And who doesn't like Elf? And that, of course, is the fact that the Polar Express is more than just a mediocre Christmas movie. It's also a horror movie. Let me explain. There's a certain level of curious joy to be found in Christmas movies. The Christmas holiday itself is something which has transcended the barriers of religion, aided on, at least in and around the States, by the secularizing and commercializing of one now quite familiar saint, who is known for giving toys to children and necromancy? Regardless, the giving spirit of Christmas was something proven to appeal to people from all kinds of backgrounds, and after years of heavy marketing and reinvention, the holiday season as we know it today was born. The role of the Christmas movie is, usually, to promote some element of generosity and giving while tying it into the contemporary idea of Christmas. For example, The Grinch is a story about our main character despising the material idea of Christmas, but coming to realize that the true spirit of the holiday comes from giving to others and being kind, which leads to him learning to appreciate and participate in the holiday because he has realized its true significance. And, of course, because he realized that stealing the gifts and food from literally everyone was a bad idea. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer uses imagery from Christmas, i.e. Santa Claus, and obviously reindeer, to tell a story of two misfits in society who set out to forge their own path because they aren't accepted by their peers, leading the people who shun them to realize that their bonds are tighter than physical differences, and that the protagonist's talents and attributes, while differing from the norm, should be accepted and integrated into society rather than singled out and ostracized, forced to assimilate to pre-established ideas and culture. Frosty the Snowman is about a group of characters who encounter a magical talking snowman during the season of Christmas and befriend him, eventually leading to a life or death struggle to protect him from the greedy magician who wants his magical hat back, the item which animated Frosty in the first place. The story is about helping others and letting go of your personal possessions for the benefit of the lesser fortunate, in this case, a snowman who will literally die without them. All of these stories, movies, focus on conveying a moral of compassion and selflessness under the all-encompassing being of Christmas spirit, taking the inherently meaningless collection of ideas that are holiday traditions and assigning purpose to them in the form of universally understandable messages about being a good person. Pretty much all Christmas movies, at least the ones intended for a family audience, follow this formula. There is a good side, which is being a decent human being, the bad side, being a despicable miser who disrespects other people and has a penchant for self-centeredness, and finally, a plot which ties these two opposing forces together, with either a redemption or defeat arc. Now, this is great and all. It's a formula which has withstood the test of time and makes for many a family classic. It's really just expected at this point, and I think it's what really makes a Christmas movie a Christmas movie. So, where does the Polar Express fit into this formula? Well, you see, that's where it gets a bit tricky. But this is a question I want you to hang on to. Right now, I think it's about time to dive into the movie itself. Let's talk Polar Express. So, if you haven't seen this movie, it's okay. I completely understand, and I'll try to summarize it for you as briefly as possible. Our main character, I'll just call him Boy, is visited on Christmas Eve by a mysterious train full of kids conducted by Tom Hanks, which is apparently headed for the North Pole. Boy is, rightly, a bit skeptical, as he already has doubts about the legitimacy of Santa Claus, but some mysterious force compels him to board regardless of his concerns. There he meets the two other protagonists, Girl and Boy number 2, as well as some unforgettable side characters like that kid. I'm not even trying to be snarky. Basically, none of the characters in this movie actually have names. But anyway, Boy, Girl, and Boy number 2 go through a bunch of wacky shenanigans until they eventually get to the North Pole, almost cause mass chaos and literally die, and then finally meet Santa, which reaffirms Boy's belief. Boy gets a bell, tying up his side plot. Girl gets the opportunity to take initiative and be a leader, which I guess wraps up her character. And Boy number 2 gets the present he wanted, which resolves the arc of him being poor and sad. Oh, and also that one kid sort of develops. And that's a 100-minute movie. Now, how is that premise made even remotely interesting, let alone scary? The story of the Polar Express isn't exactly like the original story of the Grinch, which has a clear beginning, middle, and end, communicating an obvious lesson. The Polar Express, as a book or tale, simply proposes an idea, a symbol, just as much as something like Santa Claus is a symbol. It's bare and raw and purely surface level. How does the movie contextualize this abstract concept? Well, you see, it doesn't. At least, not in the way you'd expect. Almost as soon as the film starts, we are introduced to the odd world of the Polar Express through a storybook-style narration by the main character looking back at his childhood. The opening premise and setup mirrors the vague, whimsical retelling of the main character in the original story. However, the narration quickly ends, and as does the close accuracy to the source. The boy lay awake listening to the sounds of Santa's sleigh bells, which will become important later. Keep that in mind. Rather than being immediately humorous and whimsical, like the original story, the Polar Express film takes on a different tone. The chime of the bells which jolts our protagonist awake is faint and eerie, and the tension which builds up is more than just excitement. The dark room our protagonist awakes to is kind of ominous. In the original story, the main character mentions very briefly that his friend told him Santa Claus isn't real. This is only a passing remark, and the narrator quickly dismisses it a mere sentence later, but as it was probably the closest thing to an actual conflict in the original story, the filmmakers chose this to occupy their main character. Instead of being certain of Santa's existence like the narrator in the story, the film shows a child who is plagued with doubt. Christmas movies have this weird habit of treating Santa Claus very strangely. It's accepted that he brings gifts to people every year, and this is treated as a fact, but people just seem to have a really hard time believing in him. Where do these fictional presents come from, if not this oddly specific being which exists in your universe? It's not quite like religion, something which explains natural phenomena through more human means. Gifts appearing every Christmas following you writing a letter to Santa Claus, and whether or not you've been good or bad, are pretty unexplainable otherwise. Is it just a matter of looking for other explanations? Well, potentially. But in movies like Elf, the rumor that the parents are responsible for putting presents under the tree every year is treated as the main issue killing Christmas, even when the main characters of the film are adults and, yes, parents. It's strange to see parents disregarding the existence of Santa when it is established in canon that they aren't responsible for gift giving. The Polar Express takes a similar approach with its portrayal of Santa. Framed from the protagonist's perspective, Santa is treated almost like a cryptid. As if he is cataloging the potential existence of Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, the boy has obsessively collected newspaper clippings, books, and magazines hinting at the fakeness of Santa. Curiously, these, with the obvious exception of the photograph of who I assume is our main character pulling on the beard of a mall Santa, are actually based on real media. The copy of the Saturday Evening Post featuring a portrait of a boy holding a Santa outfit and beard closely references a real magazine with the cover by artist Norman Rockwell. The magazine caused outrage when it was published in the 1950s for, very likely, shattering the dreams of young children everywhere. The showcase of real-world media was unnecessary, but provides a link between the cinematic universe and the physical one we exist in. Now, this could very well be nothing more than a nod or coincidence, but I'd like to hold on to it for what we'll be getting into later. Anyway, back to the movie itself. There are multiple layers which make the primary events of the Polar Express multifaceted and untrustworthy. For one, there is a suggestion that everything which happens aboard the Express is simply a dream. When the boy hears a train for the first time and rushes outside to see it, he yanks his robe off the bedpost, tearing its pocket and spilling marbles in the process. At the end of the film, the same exact thing happens. This, alongside other obviously absurd and unbelievable factors, indicates towards a very likely truth. None of the things we see actually happened. Another sense of unreliability is added when you consider the fact that the narrator is peering so far back into his past. The events which occurred, even if true, have a warped quality to them, due to the fact that they were experienced through the mind of a child. Unreliability is very important to the Polar Express. We feel uncertainty in the same way our main character feels uncertainty. The Polar Express gazes into the mind of a child struggling with doubt, which the audience is also forced to doubt, drenching the entire narrative in an air of mystery. The film is odd and surreal and confusing, and I think that, at least to some degree, is intentional. Now, probably the most interesting character in the entire film is the Hobo played by Tom Hanks. If you've never seen the Polar Express before, you're probably very confused, but let me explain. The protagonist meets him first on top of the train when he is searching for the girl's ticket he had lost. The Hobo calls himself the King of the North Pole and pokes fun at the idea of Santa Claus to the boy, mocking his innocence and youth. King's character seems to represent a bleak break in whimsy. He's disheveled and cynical, taking pleasure in teasing and taunting the main character. Beyond the cheerful mysticism of the passenger cars, what with their magical waiters bringing beverages of hot chocolate to the little girls and boys, there exists a less than fantastical real world. Hobos hitching rides on the tops of trains to get around, being vulgar and corrupting the perfect escape. Even in what could be a fantasy land of dreams, reality rears its ugly head. However, as simultaneously as the Hobo seems to represent reality, his character goes against it. The movie indicates that he is very likely a ghost, due to the fact that he seemingly disappears at will, and, of course, that he can survive on the top of the Polar Express. His illusory nature contrasts with his down-to-earth appearance. What makes King any more real than the train itself? That he is visible? Physical? While the conductor implies that he has encountered the Hobo before, he had never truly seen him, very likely meaning that the protagonist was the only person ever blessed to know he existed. What, then, ought the main character trust? The physically provable, or his own senses? Between people populating the Polar Express universe, reality is experienced differently, and this isn't just the case with the Hobo ghost. One of the most important motifs of the movie is the sound of Santa's sleigh bells. Upon arriving at the North Pole, the protagonist realizes that he cannot hear them ring. As much as he wants to, he can't seem to conjure it. It is only when he begs to be able to believe that he is capable and finally meets Santa Claus. So, in the Polar Express universe, there are certain elements of the world which are only perceivable to people of a certain mindset. Santa Claus is real, that much is clearly demonstrable from physical evidence, but in order to experience that evidence, you have to believe it exists. You can physically alter the world around you by changing the way you think about things. Is this because it is only by having blind faith that we can unlock the deepest truths? Or is it because of something different? As the Hobo King puts it when he speaks to the main protagonist, seeing is believing. While this may initially come off as a denouement of absurd belief, there is a separate implication which we just can't shake. The fact that the physical reality literally warps between characters. Individual sight and experience is deemed unreliable. How can we trust our senses when we choose whether or not certain things are real based on selective want? Who is right about whether or not the bells ring, those who believe in Santa or those who don't? Who is wrong? Is anyone wrong? Can anyone be wrong? In spite of our protagonist and their almost definitive proof, the rest of the world cannot help but let their beliefs slip away, leaving him trapped in an isolated, contorted state of reality. Unreliability. It plagues the Polar Express. It dominates it. Every aspect deemed fact, everything we see and hear throughout the course of the movie, is doubtable, selective, and never fully answered. But this alone isn't even the film's true horror. Recall the magazine clippings from the real world in the beginning of the film. The Polar Express, while perhaps not inexorably based on reality, contains parallels to it. Heavy parallels. The main character is framed in such a way which implies that he exists as a human being, and this complicates things slightly for the Express. Because, as you obviously know, in the real world, Santa Claus, well, you know what I mean. Between different elements of the film, there is a strong uncertainty, the selective truth which encompasses a majority of the character's thoughts and feelings. But simultaneously, with the introduction of this new layer, the real world, there very much exists an objective truth. With this context in mind, the events of the film are almost entirely, confirmably false. But it's not just a matter of one thing happening and then another thing contradicting it, which happens in many films. The subversion which occurs in the Polar Express is a conscious choice. We know the events of the movie can't be conceivably true, and they aren't, but the characters don't acknowledge this. Instead, they choose to take their alternate perceptions as truth. They choose, in every literal sense, to believe falsehoods. And not simply to the extent of embracing an abstract theory, no, but to the extent where it changes the physical output of their worlds. The children of the Polar Express are living in an entirely different state of being, completely of their own volition, feeding themselves lies and letting their desired outlook overrule all reasonable judgment and existence. And that is what makes the Polar Express terrifying. Remember when I talked about the structure of Christmas movies? Yeah, the Polar Express doesn't fit with them at all. There is no real greater moral about giving hidden beneath the film's rough exterior, unless you maybe count the whole friendship thing. The struggle the protagonist faces has nothing to do with their lack of kindness or the injustices of the world. The Polar Express is simply a story about an insecure kid, dreaming and engaging in his whimsy as normal children do. The conflict is that he doesn't believe in Santa Claus. That's it. There's no real attempt made to explain why this is morally or personally reprehensible, and ultimately, it's such an insignificant development which will only last the average child viewer another few years. The film doesn't have substance. But maybe that's what makes it great. Christmas is a season of aesthetics. Santa Claus, reindeer, elves, candy, stockings, all of these things are meaningless in the end, but when we look back at Christmas, those are the things that seem to stick. They make us nostalgic. They make us happy. The main character in the Polar Express is polluted by these meaningless symbols. Rather than embracing the spirit of giving and family and friendship, he chooses instead to guard his idols, more intent on preserving the what than the why. It's very easy to get caught up with these material alliances, and to lose sight of the feelings and people who really matter. It's okay to let go of childhood, lest you forget to keep up with reality. Happy holidays, everyone! I hope you found this video festive enough. If you enjoyed it, it would mean a lot to me if you could like this video and subscribe. I'm a small channel and every bit of support helps, if you have the time, of course. And feel free to tell me what you thought about the movie in the comments. There are no wrong opinions here. You can check out my socials in the description and my Fiverr page where I'm planning to do commissions for art. Right now I'm doing sprites and character designs on there, so if you'd like to purchase something from me, that'd be super cool. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. It really means a lot to me that you stuck around, and I hope you've had a fantastic holiday season and New Year. Bye!